Okay, it looks like the masses have pretty much trickled in. Some people might be coming in here and there as we move forward, but that'll be okay. So first, I just wanted to thank everybody so much for coming tonight, and to thank everybody who helped me put this on and make this possible. Kendall on here is going to be the co-host for the night, so she'll be helping me out if I need anything. So thank you, Kendall. I'll start off with the bios, and I thank you for the panelists who have agreed to be here. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay, great, thank you. So first we have Dr. Sarah Kuhn, who was born and raised in Germany, and she earned her law degree at the Freie Universität in Berlin. She then received her PhD in criminology at Simon Fraser University in Canada. Dr. Kuhn is currently an associate professor at Slippery Rock University in the Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice. Her current research interests are program evaluations, public perceptions of offenders in the criminal justice system, comparative juvenile justice, and restorative justice. She has also facilitated victor offender mediation during graduate school in Canada and has taught in Inside Out classes at SCI Mercer. Our second panelist is Dr. Conti. He is professor of sociology from here at Duquesne University, who specializes in police socialization, social psychology, and restorative justice, along with 6 other men serving life sentences at the State Correctional Institution in Pittsburgh. Dr. Conti founded the Elsinore Avenue think tank for restorative justice, which is how I became to be a big part of this too and get interested in these topics. That was created and developed out of a program training called Inside Out. After the prison closed, the EBTT was reestablished on campus at Duquesne as a weekly conference of community activists and ex-offenders for developing programs for ongoing to reduce recidivism and to address the needs of vulnerable youth. Dr. Conti coordinates Duquesne Social Justice Association and a member of the National Steering Committee for the Inside Out program. And his work has appeared in numerous publications from Dialogues in Social Justice all the way to the Prison Journal. Dr. Pop, she is a loving mother who grew up in a large Catholic family in New York City, and she is the eldest of 5 siblings. And before she moved here in 2007 to Pittsburgh. In 2003, she received her doctorate in sociology. Coming from a military and law enforcement family, Dr. Pop decided to focus on criminal justice and victims of crime, and she considers herself to still be in the family business. More recently, Dr. Pop has focused her research on bullying and criminal victimization in schools, attempting to both identify the risk factors for being victimized and the ameliorating factors that minimize the long-term consequences of being victimized so that she can build resiliency among these vulnerable populations. And then our last 3 panelists are Terrell, who's joining us all the way from Louisiana, which is the incarceration capital of the world. And he currently serves at Lafourche Parish Correctional Complex. He was a participant in the Inside Out program, a virtual one that has expanded. It's the course at Nicholls State University. As of today, right now, while we're here, he's a graduate of that program, and he served as class speaker. Also during his time of incarceration, Terrell received a certificate in welding from the Fletcher Community College, and he's scheduled to return home this coming Saturday, which is really exciting. And he looks forward to playing video games with his 8-year-old son and eating lasagna. Charlie is a dedicated member of the Elsinore Avenue think tank for restorative justice. He's been there for about 1.5 years now, and he's also a member of the Big Idea team, which is a community engaged intergenerational work group of the EBTT. After being unfairly sentenced to 30 to 71 years for a first major offense, Charlie utilized every legal avenue at his disposal until getting his case overturned by the Third Circuit Court via a handwritten motion that he had actually submitted 17 years prior. As a result, Charlie was finally released in 2004 after serving 18 years. After proving a constitutional violation, his case and legal battle has set national precedent and is still in the federal law books today. While incarcerated, he also taught math to his fellow inmates, and every single individual who took that class with him passed, so that's pretty awesome.
He also has the best car out of any of us.
And the best car out of any of us.
Thank you, Norm. Which one?
The Hellcat.
Oh, I thought you meant the Mercedes.
No, I
I'm
don't
sorry.
care. I'm anti Mercedes. I like the muscle car.
Okay.
Many cars, all of the cars. And then last but not least, certainly not least, we have Juan, who's also joining us all the way from Louisiana, where he serves as a trustee at the Lafourche Parish Transitional Work Release Program, TWP. And Juan was also a participant and class speaker for the Nicholls State Inside Out program, the one in fall of 2020, who was a part of also Dr. Conti, who is on the call with us tonight, first ever virtual police training of Inside Out. Juan was institutionalized as a juvenile at the age of 14, and after the completion of his sentence, Juan will have spent 28 out of the 42 years of his life incarcerated. But he is a hard worker who loves basketball, playing cards, and most of all, his daughter. When he's home, Juan enjoys housework, taking pride in his possessions, and eating seafood, but when somebody else cooks it, which I think I can agree with too. Okay. So now to get into our discussion, I'm just going to stop my share here. So I think just to kick this off, I would say, what is restorative justice for those of us who might not know what it is, and this is our first experience with it? How would you define and understand restorative justice? Dr. Kuhn, maybe you could start us off.
Unmuting myself will probably help. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So restorative justice is it's a process where we try to involve all stakeholders that are involved by a crime or affected by a crime. So the traditional criminal justice system usually focuses on which laws have been broken, who did it, and then how should the offender be punished. In restorative justice, we really try to move away from that and look at which harm, what harm has been caused. And what can we do to move forward from that? And again, trying to involve all stakeholders that are involved in crime. It's important. It's not just something is restorative or not. It's kind of a spectrum, and there are a lot of programs and processes in place that are partially or fully restorative. This is why it's so hard to define it. There's not really one universally agreed definition, because there are so many things that are called restorative, and sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not, and everything in between as well. It originated actually in Canada and Australia with the Native and Aboriginal populations there. It's peacemaking, it's community building. So it's much more than just trying to focus on offenders. It's holding them accountable, but we're actively inviting them to repair the harm that they have caused and re-invite them back into our communities. I don't know how much more you want, but that's just to get us started, I guess.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Kuhn, for getting us started. Does any of the other panelists have anything they'd like to add before I move on to another question?
I'd throw in that in an even looser way to look at it is that our current justice system, right, is retributive justice, right? Retribution, it's vindictive. You're trying to harm, assert harm onto the offender. Whereas restorative justice looks at the harms suffered by all the engaged parties.
Thank you for that, Dr. Conti. And just as an aside to let everyone know as you move forward, I will point some specific questions to the panelists, but then I would also like the panelists to feel comfortable jumping in on a question that they feel they have something of importance to add on to. So with that being said, Dr. Kuhn, I know that you have a lot of research in between the comparison of the criminal justice system we see today and restorative justice. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how it might compare? Is it more or less effective? What are the benefits or the limitations of it?
Eventually, I'll get the unmute done. Eventually, we have some time together. So just to point out, I've done some research on it, but I'm definitely not the expert in the field who has done all the studies. There's plenty of research on restorative justice. And I think the general consensus is that it is highly beneficial. I think where the problem comes in, and it goes back to what I said before, is that there are so many different programs and processes with restorative justice or labeled as restorative justice. And it's also being used with a lot of different groups, young and old, serious and non-serious offenders, fully or partially restorative, that there is a lot of variability in terms of effectiveness. As I said, though, generally it's been shown to be much more effective in terms of victim and offender satisfaction with the process, because as Dr. Conti said, they're actively involved in a search for a solution. The whole community, all the stakeholders are involved. So it's empowering, it's community building. But also in terms of reductions in recidivism, it's been done or implemented at schools. It's been shown to lead to fewer suspensions or expulsions from school. So overall, it's highly beneficial. It's just a question in terms of how it's being measured and how it's being implemented. And I just want to give two examples that were more recently in the news. Or one was from last fall, actually. During a Black Lives Matter protest, one African-American teenager hit a police officer over his head with a skateboard, and the officer actually suffered from a major concussion. So instead of going the traditional retributive route and laying charges and possibly ruining a teenager's future career and life, they actually had a victim offender mediation. They met, they talked it over, they got to know each other, and the end result was that the teenager now thinks of the police officer as his mentor who drives him to football practice. So that's an example of something extremely positive, fully restorative, right? Where the outcome just resembles nothing of what we have in the traditional criminal justice system. The other scenario that was more recent in the news was the African-American bird watcher in Central Park in New York. There was a white lady, Amy Cooper, and she didn't have her dog on leash, and he asked her to put the dog on the leash because he didn't want to scare away the dogs. She did not like this. She called 911 and yelled into the phone, "I'm being threatened and attacked by an African-American man. My dog is too." When the police arrived, he had it all on camera, he showed it, and she was charged with false reporting. Those charges were eventually dismissed because she participated in the so-called restorative justice program, where she attended 4 or 5 sessions, and it was reported that she learned a lot about empathy and racial discrimination and so on. So I don't know. The victim was never involved in that. There was no apology, at least not publicly. So how restorative is that really? So that's kind of just going back to what I said. It's really hard to measure the effectiveness of restorative justice because there's so much variability in terms of what it can be. But overall, if it's done right, it's been shown much, much more effective for victims, offenders, and recidivism and community building than the traditional criminal justice system.
With that being said, Dr. Pop, if I can turn to you, I know that you have more of an expertise in victimization, if you'd like to pick up on that.
Yeah, I think that maybe I'm the squeaky wheel for the panel. I like restorative justice on theory and concept, but when you look at it from some of the victim research, that it is not always so victim focused as it really should be. When you read some of the foundational material for restorative justice, victims are front and center. And for victims, that's a good thing, because in the punitive system, victims are nowhere. And so restorative justice brings them into the process. It's definitely something we need in the United States. But there have been some criticism from victims advocates groups that in many cases, restorative justice has been leaving the victims out, or it's a one size fits all for the victim without, assessing what the victim needs out of the restorative justice process. So Dr. Kuhn was correct when she says that when we look at the studies assessing the victims who've been through the process of restorative justice, they are very happy with the outcome. They're satisfied, they feel like they've been heard, they feel like justice has been done. But many of the victims feel like, if they're forced to sit down in mediation, that they may not be emotionally ready for it. It's more focused on helping the offender. And that's because our criminal justice system is more focused on the offender. When we look outside the US into like New Zealand and Australia, they do a much more victim focused And here in the US, we're more offender focused. And so that's one of the problems with trying to transform our criminal justice system to be more restorative justice, focus on restorative justice. Does that make sense? It's like I'm rambling a little.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Pop. Dr. Conti, I saw a lot of head nods. If you'd like to add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Anne Marie said. It's not a magic thing, a magic wand you wave and everyone's better. You have to look at obviously you start with the victim. Excuse me. You start with the community, right? And then you get to the offender, right? What harm did this person suffer? And one of I think a terrible example I like to use is from 10 years ago. A good friend of mine, Sergeant Colleen Bristow, she works with a think tank sometimes. She wasn't a sergeant back then. She was a patrol officer. And on the north side, some guys were robbing some drug dealers, and there was somehow some civilians got mixed up in it, and the police are called, and one of the guys is running to his van to get away. He has his gun out. She has her gun out. He doesn't shoot her. He tries to pull, they don't shoot each other. She tries to pull him out of the van, and she gets dragged 15 feet behind the van and almost killed. Brain injuries, right? Legitimate. Took her 5 years of rehab to get back on the job. The guy got 5 years in prison for that. Now, I have so many friends that have gotten life or just decades and decades, and you think, like, you almost killed a cop and you got 5 years. And, she was obviously very traumatized by this. Her daughter was a little girl back then. She was very traumatized by this. The guy did his 5 years, got out, and went right back in. So it's like, she's like, all this bad thing happened. No one asked me anything, and no one cared. Sort of in law enforcement, it's like, unless you get shot, if you get shot, you're a hero. If you get hurt another way, yeah, well, maybe you're a girl. You shouldn't have been there. Maybe, I don't know. But so it's like she would have felt a lot better if she could have been involved, and this guy could have just, avoided the culture of street crime. So yeah, I mean, our criminal justice system fails in so many other ways, and you should expect, as it incorporates restorative justice, we'll find ways to screw it up.
Dr. Conkey, that actually leads me right into one of my next questions. As we talk about restorative justice and what it means to be how in America we're focused a lot on the offender, I was wondering if you could highlight for us some of the major issues with our current criminal justice system that we might not know about, and a reason why we would really want to be looking at other options instead.
You want me to answer that?
Well, you did lead us right into it.
Yeah, we have and everyone knows this, we have the highest incarceration rate on the planet in history, right? That tells you that something is terribly wrong. If you talk to folks in prison, if you talk to cops, if you talk to DAs, everyone's going to tell you that it's not a justice system, it's an injustice system, right? So you can look at the statistics, and we talk about the statistics and the rates and this and that all day, but for me, it's like, it's just on its face wrong, and you got to figure out a better way. And I'll leave it to the panelists like Sarah and Anne Marie who know better in this stuff.
To build on that, and what's really puzzling is that we have been doing this since the 80s and 90s. It's not been shown to work. Nevertheless, we continue to do it, thinking eventually this will work, right? So we have people, 75% in PA being released from prison, and 75% will be back within 3 years. Obviously, this is harming our communities. It costs so much money that we could spend way better, but we just insist on continuing with what we have been doing, right? So I find that mind-boggling. When I teach my students about how it's done in Germany, and I'm not saying it's better in all aspects, but the recidivism rate is much lower, given that we don't have access to guns as much and availability of guns. But it's way more focused on rehabilitation, incarceration as the last resort, and it works. But even then, my students are like, but that doesn't seem right. It's not severe enough. I'm like, but I've just told you it is severe enough because they're not reoffending. So I think we just have, and I'm included in that as well. If you hear about a serious crime, you always think, oh, we want punishment. That's the first emotional reaction you have, right? You don't think about holding hands and making peace. You want revenge, especially if somebody you know well, your family members have been hurt. But it's just been shown to not be effective. So, and I think especially what Dr. Pop and Dr. Conti said about asking the victim what they need, right? What are their needs, and not sidelining them and talking on behalf of them, not knowing what they want, does not make any sense.
Yeah, I want to sort of segue into this, off an idea that Sarah brought up, is that we sometimes forget that the modern criminal justice system, not from the 80s, but go back a couple hundred years, the purpose was to end things like blood feuds and these long-ranging, fights for justice between groups of families or groups of people. And that the idea was that the government would be a neutral party who could come in and think clearly about what was happening and apply justice to the situation. And so you would take retribution and vengeance out of the process, and instead you would be more fair because this neutral party was deciding the outcome of the trials. But what we really have had happen is the exact opposite. The state has now become the revenge in chief, and then they are applying for retribution to the offenders and not looking at the circumstances around the criminal behavior. That's why in the U.S., it's this Pennsylvania versus whatever the defendant's name is because the state is acting as as the victim. I'm sorry, I cut myself off.
Thank you. And so as we talk about this and we're talking about recidivism and how this is like, retribution and stuff in a way, how do we, what are the benefits for society as a whole upon reentry, and how does it help society when we welcome offenders back into our society and bring them in from that perspective rather than shunning them? As I know Dr. Kuhn had pointed out, how it's easy to look at them as needing these severe punishments, and then it can ostracize them from us when they come back. So how is restorative justice a lot better for bringing individuals back into our community, and how does that help everybody?
I can go first and then somebody can jump in. I think, as I said, I mean, if people are at 70%, 75% are recidivating when they come back to our communities, that's harming us, right? So if we can bring that number down, that serves society overall, because we will have less crime, right? It'll be less expensive. Less expensive. We can use that money otherwise, and communities will be safer. Research has shown that the communities that have the most crime have the least bond, or don't have that community or the strong bond that they need. Communities with stronger bonds, more social capital, have less crime. So if we can manage to not exclude offenders and put them behind bars, but have them back as productive citizens and invite them back into our communities, actively repairing and giving back, we see that with the think tank. Every Friday when we meet, I'm amazed by what these men that were formerly incarcerated do now in the community. It's been a loss that they were away for so long. It would be a waste to keep them behind bars, but they're back now and they're giving back, and they're doing better stuff than most of my friends do on a day-to-day basis. So they contribute to society, and I think that's the big benefit, and it makes our communities much safer.
Could I jump in here a second?
Absolutely, Charlie. I was going to come to you next. Took the words out of my
well, one of the hard parts about getting out is being accepted in the communities. That's one of the biggest problems. The Black communities will accept you more often and help you more than the white communities. I'm sorry to bring up the difference in races and that, but that's the way it is. I mean, I've been accepted in Black communities a whole lot more than in white communities. And I mean, it comes down to your jobs, everything about it, everything you try to do. I went through, I don't know how many jobs because I had been incarcerated, they would not hire me, black, white, or otherwise. They just would not hire me. I mean, I went through 249, Union 249, Truck Drivers Union, and it used to be that it was almost a requirement that you did some time to drive a truck. Now you can't even get in the door. I ended up finally getting into a place, and the funny part about it, it was an Ohio State cop, retired, that hired me for driving. And the company I was in with had a union portion and a non-union portion. In other words, good guys and formerly incarcerated guys, but we all got paid the same. It was just, you got that title because you're incarcerated. You had been incarcerated. But like I said, it's the main thing is the acceptance from everyone, not just one community and not the other. It's got to be the whole works. Thank you.
Thank you for jumping in on that, Charlie. I was going to wanting to get your opinion on that, because I know that when we had spoken last week, I asked you, what's like the biggest thing that would be able to help members who are trying to return to society and are trying to do the best. And you had let me know that you had put in 200 job applications that had all been denied.
Easy.
Like,
yeah.
200, how no wonder recidivism rates are so high when it's nearly impossible to move forward from that, even when you do try. And then something else that you had mentioned to me was you said the biggest thing that could help was acceptance. And so I think that you kind of hit on that here, and that made me feel something in my heart. If you'd like to say anything else about that piece.
Well, it seems like that's the way it is. The Black communities definitely, don't hold this against you, because they know it happens. It's something that definitely happens, whereas the white communities will hold it against you, definitely will hold it against you, and make it so that you can't do nothing. I mean, it's hard to even get a place to live in certain places, If they know that you've been incarcerated, they get away from giving you a place to rent or whatever. There is that does happen. I mean, you may not know about it, but it does happen. A lot of people don't know about what's really going on.
Yeah, it makes it difficult. Go ahead, Dr. Kuhn.
The ironic thing about this is that a lot of people in the public try to stay away and exclude people who have committed crimes, and they think that's safer to stay away from them. But research has shown they're more likely to recidivate because they have no connections to their community. They don't have a job. They don't have a place to live. What do? You continue with your criminal lifestyle, right? So it gives you that false sense of security, keeping them away, but it's totally counterproductive.
Yeah, and I mean, you can always go back to prison and they will accept you, So, there's your recidivism,
I was going to say,
go ahead, Dr. Pop. Thank you.
I was going to say that, what Charlie was talking about in terms of acceptance, I was thinking about the labeling theory concept of the dramatization of evil, that it's not the criminal for many of us becomes the behavior. And we can't see them as complete people anymore. We see them as this criminal act as being all defining, when we really should have a much broader view of all people, that people are complex and they have multiple characteristics and traits that are beneficial to society, and nobody is defined by one moment in their life, or shouldn't be defined by one moment in their life. But that's exactly what the punitive system in the US does to individuals who are convicted of a crime, is we make them wear a big letter C and make them carry the shame, and thought that this is going to be beneficial to our society, which it's not.
It's like the scarlet letter. You said it right. The big C and carry the chain, the ball and chain. You always have it, and people always hold it against you, no matter what you do. There's still people that hold it against you, You know, and they're not your victims either. They're just people that know things that are going on, you know.
Right. I want to bring in Juan and Terrell into the conversation a little bit too, and to get their thoughts on this, especially as graduates of the Inside Out program and who are on work release and are going to be getting released this weekend. So I'd like to bring them in on the conversation and hear their thoughts on that too.
All right, how y'all doing today? I'd like to speak up on like two subjects that y'all had about the for the change for us, you know, the justice. I like to say like, I mean, I understand when a person do wrong. I mean, you know, wrong is wrong. I mean, ain't no way you can put it, but you know, right is right. But like for us the community, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I figure like if a person did something small or just, I mean, whatever it is, you know what I'm saying? I mean, even if, I mean, nowadays it can be an accident, you know what I'm saying, you know, that you don't hurt somebody, you know what I'm saying? I mean, they're trying to give you a life sentence behind it, you know what I'm saying? I mean, an accident, an accident is a mistake, you know what I'm saying, to me, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, I just figure like if it had people like more people that would go around and just, you know, just mingle with the community, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it don't matter what color, black or white, you know what I'm saying? I mean, people want to learn, you know what I'm saying? I mean, they're not afraid to learn, but if they're not seeing good in front of them, you know what I'm saying? I mean, how they gonna know how to pick up good? You know what I'm saying? You surrounded around just in your neighborhood, I'm just saying the black community. 98% of the black neighborhoods, you know what I'm saying, you know, that you know that we come up in. I mean, ain't number of violence. I mean, as soon as you walk out the door, you know what I'm saying? You got violence going on inside your house, you know what I'm saying? I mean, your mom on drugs. I mean, your sister, your brother, I mean, they're on drugs. So, I mean, you 8, 9 years old, you know, you don't have the full understanding, you know what I'm saying? But that's what you're picking up, you know what I'm saying? That's like a habit, you know what I'm saying? Of something that you're picking up. And I like what Mr. Charlie had said about he had to put in so many applications for him getting a job for him being incarcerated, you know what I'm saying? I'm 42 years old, you know what I'm saying? But I never had no kind of identification as myself, you know what I'm saying? You know, matter of fact, I had an incident today. I mean, I never had a birth certificate, social security card, ID, or driver license. But I own this stuff. But I own this stuff through somebody else's name. You know what I'm saying? So today I went to go to the birth certificate place to get a birth certificate. So I had to go to the birth certificate place first to go get an ID because that's something that I want to do. Because I'm tired, so I want to change. When the people pull my name up today, the people say I was unknown. I mean, so I know it sounds crazy, but the people was like I don't even exist. I mean, just period. Like, you know, they had to call the headquarters, which is in New Orleans, for to see, you know, if who is this guy or whatever, this and that. The headquarters, I mean, they came back on to respond like he's unknown, so I would have to go through another procedure for to get an ID. I mean, for to get a birth certificate, for to get an ID. You know, I mean, you know, and you know, I'm not ashamed to say it. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean, that's just the way the cards was dealt to me. You know, and for it's just getting a job or whatever. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm in a situation right now to where you know I'm surrounded around people that want to see me do good, and I want to see myself do good. You know what I'm saying? So you know, you got to realize for it's just people give you a chance. People give you a chance to go back out there. You know what I'm saying? But you know what I'm saying? But they don't give you, you know what I'm saying, the right chance that you need. You know what I'm saying? You feel me? Which is it's on you. But sometimes you got to look back and say, well, look, I see who you is now, and I know where you're trying to go. You know what I'm saying? But see where I came from. So so you can help me take an extra step. It don't matter how old you is, you know what I'm saying? I mean, once you've been through something in life, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's hard for me to explain, you know what I'm saying? Because it's hard. You know what I'm saying? Just trying to, you know, black or white. I mean, look around. I mean, it don't matter, you know what I'm saying, what color you is. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just that if you can talk to a person a little better, not for it just with not no attitude, I ain't talking about that kind of talking. I'm talking for it's just, you know, go to neighborhoods and let people know, you know, look, all right, this was going on. I mean, you know, try to help, you know, if help wanted. Now, if your help ain't wanted, I understand that. But, you know, but if people looking for help, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I mean, you should help them. Mr. Charlie said he's been in jail. You know, I figure that you should not be singled out. Period. I mean, just I don't care if you I don't care what you've done. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, the only thing I don't respect, you know what I'm saying, is, you know, I mean, I'm gonna tell y'all the only thing I really don't respect, I don't respect nobody messing with no kids. You know what I'm saying? I'm not into it. I mean that's something they done. I mean, hey, that's on them, but I just don't respect it. You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, I mean, you took full advantage of a person. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? I'm just not into that. You know what I'm saying? But you know. You know, I just want to just, you know what I'm saying, you know, just butt in on that, you know what I'm saying? Because I mean, hey, I mean, like I said, you know what I'm saying? I mean, we in a situation right now to where they're giving us a change, a chance, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, but we also trying to change, you know? So it ain't gonna be nothing for us to grab back onto the lifestyle that we was living, you know? That's why I think that the murder rate and everything else is so high, you know what I'm saying? Because people get denied so much, you know, especially a black man get denied like it's, you know, like, I mean, like it ain't nothing. They quick to deny a black man, like, you know, all right, ain't nothing. I mean, you know, you ain't got nothing going on. You feel me? So that make you say, well, look, all right, cool, I tried, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I see nobody ain't giving me a chance. But Mr. Charlie said he put 22 applications in. Shit, he good. 100. I mean, 100. I mean, he was done with what he was doing, you know what I'm saying? And Mr. Charlie, hey, more power to you. And when I get out of here, I wish I can put in one more application more than you if I got it, because I mean, because hey, you know how it is, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm tired. I mean, when you're tired, you're tired. I mean, ain't nothing else you can do.
You know,
Go
I agree with Juan was saying, you know, like in Louisiana, we still under the Napoleon law, like, you know, like you could get more time for drugs than a violent crime down here. And when we go back into society, like, well, at least when most of us go back into society, we don't have a chance because they don't give us a chance. But you know, they started doing something here, like letting us get certifications. Like I got my forklift certification and my welder qualification. And they're supposed to go through the Goodwill to where they pay the employer to hire us and give us a job for like 6 months. They pay them to pay us for 6 months to let us go to work. But I feel like it shouldn't just take them to do that for them to take a chance on us and give us a job, you know? Like I feel like we should be entitled to a chance when we get back out without goodwill too, like, you know? It's like most people ain't gonna hesitate to hire us because they get paid to hire us. But you know, what if we didn't have the goodwill program? You know, but sometimes you need to be pointed in the right direction. That's all.
Well, let me tell you something. These group of people you see here on the screen,
Yeah.
and the groups that you can get into, they're the people that are trying their hardest. And I say this every week at the think tank. They're trying their hardest to accept us. Right. And they are, which is a relief. Believe it.
Yeah, it is. I you know, like I can tell, and you know, I can also feel the energy, like, so, you know, I know.
I think it's easy to be accepting when, well, something that I was thinking of as you guys were talking is that if you are going and you are serving this time and that's how the criminal justice system is set up, then when you return, I mean, have you not served your time already? And why would you continue to be punished at that point if you've already apparently, you know, done the time that you were supposed to do for your crime? So on that thought, before I open it up to Q&A, because I'm getting some messages, people are really interested in what's going on with everything here. I wanted to turn to maybe one of the panelists who might be able to comment on sort of like the war on drugs, about the comment of, you know, drugs can put you into prison for longer than a violent crime even, because that was, you know, pretty jarring when I heard that, and I know accurate.
Right. And before y'all start, like on what you say, like my probation got violated from not completing classes with my probation. So I had to back up my probation time. And on top of that, I should go home in like 9 days. When I get released, I still gotta go home on parole. You know, like to me, I feel like that's double jeopardy though.
Right.
But you know, it's like my freedom, like I'm still not free. I still gotta go home and serve more time.
What her name? Hey, Miss D.
What song?
Hey, Miss D.
Yes.
Uh, I mean, we don't want to make it look like we desperate to get pampered. You know what I'm saying, or nothing like that. No, I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying. I don't want anybody to think that. You know what I'm saying, that we. You know what I'm saying. We looking to get pampered, but nothing like that. You know what I'm saying. But we just. I'm gonna say like for it's like my household. I mean, my dad did. I don't have no brother. I got a sister that's on drugs, and I got a mom that's on drugs. You feel me? So I really had. It goes by your choice that you make it. But sometimes sometimes you got to realize, you know what I'm saying, you don't see no other choice, you know what I'm saying? So sometimes you kind of forced to do things, you know what I'm saying? And to the point I'm at in my life right now, you know what I'm saying? And I'm gonna put this on God because I know everybody believe. God puts certain people in the front of you, you know what I'm saying, for us to give you the help that you need. And since I've been doing time, you know what I'm saying, and I'm just in time, I never looked it for help for us just, I might have said something about help, but I just used the word help, but I never really, really grabbed on to the help or whatever this and that. But I'm in a situation now to where I'm around some people that they're not forcing me for help, but when I ask for it, up in a a facility like I'm in right now, the work relief, they go out their way to make sure, you know what I'm saying, that you don't return. They try to provide you with a job for when you get out. Just, they try to be all around the board, you know what I'm saying, for the help, you know what I'm saying? So right now, in a situation I'm in now, you got to be willing not to want to help yourself, period, for somebody not to help you, you know what I'm saying? Because they put it in front of you, it's like somebody putting a steak in front of you, and you be like, well, look, I don't want to eat, but you know you're hungry, you know?
Everybody's got to eat. Exactly. So
Right.
what are you going to do?
Right, you know what I'm saying? Even if you don't want no sauce on it, you just want to eat just straight meat. You got to eat. You feel me? Because you're hungry, and some people that's incarcerated, you know what I'm saying, that's what the point of where they at, you know what I'm saying? They tired, you know what I mean? The beds get hard. You can have 4, 5 mattresses or bed, whatever, it's still, it get hard because it don't get hard for your body, it get hard for your brain. You know what I'm saying? So, I just wanted to share that with y'all, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, thank you, Juan. Thank you for jumping in on that. And I don't want to cut anybody off. I am going to turn to Q&A, kind of open it up to the audience who would like to ask some questions to the panel. But before I do that, I want to ask all 6 of the panelists if they have anything else that they feel is really important to this conversation that we haven't covered yet, that might be important to know for people before we start asking questions.
I'd like to push back on Juan and say that I would like to be pampered, and Kristen needs to stop walking around and kicking things over over at his place.
Okay, if there's no other any other comments for that, Emily Burns has a question that she would like to ask.
Yeah, hi, I'm Emily. I actually have an internship with ACAR, which is the Allegheny County Anchored Reentry Program here in Pittsburgh. So I wanted to come to this panel just to learn a little bit more about what's going on here and just get some better background knowledge about the people who I'm helping with reentry. So my question was, I was thinking when Charlie was speaking before, how do you think acceptance can be more common with people who are reentering society? Like, what really helped you to feel welcomed back into society when you came out?
Well, the people like you, the people on this panel, you know, that, I mean, I've been out for 17 years and it's been a struggle the whole time. But people like you finally running into, you know, people that are actually trying to understand. See, that's the whole thing right there. People don't understand what we are going through. I mean, we paid our debt. We did our time. We get out. We need to start living again, because when you go in, your time stops. I don't know if you understand me, but whenever you're inside, time stops. And when you get out, you have to catch up on everything, all the technology, everything that's going on. You don't know nothing about it because you didn't live it. You have to catch up to all of that. So I was in for 18. I got a whole lot of catching up to do. I mean, when I came out, my daughter took me to a phone store, had no idea what I was doing. And this woman's talking to me, telling me all about this phone. I said, well, how do you keep the long wire? And she says, there's no wire. I said, well, then you better tell her, because I don't understand the thing you're saying. Yeah. But, you know, think little things, you know, that you need to know. And I mean, people say, hey, do you remember what, you know, this happened then? No, I don't remember it. I wasn't here. You know, all, like I said, your time stops. It's hard to explain. It stops when you go in. Then you come out and you got to catch up to everything. You know, now that thing with the 200 applications, I had a resume that I used. And on the resume, of course, I had to put down that I had been incarcerated, because they wanted to know, well, what did you do for the last 18 years, you know? And that's how I ended up going and getting a job myself. You know, I had all the experience. Every place I put applications in, I had experience to those jobs, and they still didn't hire me because of being a former inmate. So, you know, like I said, people like you are a godsend for us.
To add on that, I think that's generally the problem. People who are already interested in justice and community building and re-entry, they are already open-minded, and they're like, welcome back. We'll try to get you back on your feet. But then what do you do with the rest of society who has no clue and also probably doesn't want to know, right? They think that punishment works, and the more severe it is, the better it is. What I have found in my Inside Out classes, and Norm and Kathleen can probably attest to that as well, it's also about community building and putting a human face on people who are involved in the criminal justice system. We talk about mass incarceration, high recidivism rates, but all that is really just numbers. And I think the public has a really hard time picturing what that means and how many people actually come back to our communities. It's over 95% that leave prison and come back to live with us in our communities. So I think education like Inside Out classes, where you humanize the process, where you build community, where you have dialogue across prison walls or over prison walls, or however you want to see it, where you connect two groups that are completely different, and public education is highly, highly important. To bridge that. But the question is, how do you do it, right? Like, we can have panels like this, but again, it's always the same people showing up, the ones that already have an open mind to that, right? So how do you get the other half, or more than half, actually, how do you get everyone else involved? So that's the tricky part for sure.
Yes, that's tricky, but yeah, like someone, I don't know which one was talking about it, said about the state is taking over for your victims. And that's the truth. And all the state cares about is the numbers, fill the beds. That's all they care about, fill themselves, you know? And I mean, that's exactly what they're looking at with your parole and everything. You got the parole people, they go out, if you look at them wrong, they're going to jam you up and put you back in. You know, they need the education as much as we do. You know, I mean, I was through a bad, time in the courts. I mean, they really got over on me, and I ended up having to do the 18 years it took me that long to overturn it, and prove to them how bad the courts are. That's where one of the places you got to start is, your justice system. It's really it's really bad. And I mean, because a lawyer sold me out, a lawyer and a judge sold me out, and I overturned it on a motion that I hand wrote 17 years prior to that. The federal courts finally saw what I was trying to get across to them, and they overturned my case. But it was because of a judge and an attorney that I had to do all that time. I should have never got that kind of time, but I did. And thankfully I was able to overturn it. But one of the things, the main thing is you got to start with the justice system. You got to change that, because they railroad people every day. Not only me, I mean, all kind of people, they railroad them every day. Like I said, the state just wants to keep them damn beds filled.
Dee, real quick, I'd like to spin off what Charlie and Sarah just said.
And if you can add a little bit about what the Inside Out program is too.
That's probably perfect. I'll say that the first thing I was going to say is there's another side to it. It's not just about supporting these guys, which we do. We support them through partnerships. Right? We're always working on things with them. We're not necessarily helping them, and they're not necessarily helping us. We're partnering. We're working together on things.
Oh, you're helping us more than you know.
Well, yeah, but Charlie, that's the other side of this. Those of us that do this, we find ways to tie it into our job and advance our careers through it, and that's fine. But our careers only go but so high. It doesn't. In the end, it's not worth it. We do this because we're desperate and we're starving for community. So we find other people that are hungry, and we work with you, and that's sort of where Inside Out has brought me after 14 years of it. Inside Out is a program started by a guy doing life and a woman who was an adjunct professor at Temple. And they said, let's bring students from Temple and guys in prison together and have a class. It became a national, now international program. There's 1,000 professors doing it. There's thousands of people going through it. It's in law schools now. There's even a program in a police academy that I've heard is just fantastic. And I'll stop there.
And
well, I didn't know about all those people, but that's good to hear.
Dr. Haas, I noticed you had a question in the chat. If you would like to ask that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's outstanding, and I'm very delighted to be here. I'm a researcher in clinical psychology and neuroscience, and I'm interested in empathy, and I've done some work on empathy. And I was going back to Charlie's comment about what matters in the community, what kinds of responses matter. And I think empathy is important, but unfortunately, I think half of the human race, or maybe more, are not real good on empathy. And I think we have to work on developing empathy. But in the meanwhile, I think we need to treat everyone with respect to begin with. I think that when people finish, they're released from prison and they've served their term, as Charlie was saying, we in the community have to respect, in some sense, the justice system and say that they've done their job. And we need to respect the fact that they've paid their dues. And that's a simple, basic principle that's very hard to teach. But in some ways, it may be easier with emphasis on education and role modeling than teaching people empathy, which is tough. Some of us have empathy and will empathize and we can provide it. But as Charlie's saying, it's not everyone. And so I think we have a lot more work to do just on recognizing in our community that everyone deserves respect. Human beings deserve respect, and especially when they've served their time, they deserve to be full abiding and full engaged community citizens. So anyway, that was my little speech.
You're absolutely right.
Can I jump in here for a second?
Yes.
One of the things, as Dee pointed out, I'm from a long family of law enforcement officers. One of the things that really was shocked me was one day learning that when you get out of Attica, they basically let you out a side door with like $20 and a ticket back to New York City. And that's all you have. And, you know, trying to understand if we want to build community and acknowledge the time these men and women spend in prison and that they have served their time. We have a big ceremony at the beginning where we punish them, right? We have a trial. It's all this grand show. It's in the news. But on the way out, it's kind of they're being snuck out the back door. There's not the same fanfare. Hey, you've done your 20 years, you've paid your debt, and let's have a kind of a reintegration ceremony. Welcome back. Come back to the community. Here's what you need realistically. I'm thinking about Braithwaite's reintegrative shaming, and I'm also thinking about parenting because the 6-year-olds in the house, you punish, but then you also reintegrate. You tell the child, I love you. You're a member of my family forever. And that's true about criminals, that you're part of the community forever. And so we need to figure out, I think we need to figure out how to make that a bigger statement at the end, because that would indicate that they were done and that they should be treated like members of the community and not as outsiders. That's just my thought. I'm sorry.
You're absolutely right again, you know, and a little story there. Okay, that's what they do with people that they're throwing out, getting them out of there. But the people that are going on parole, they just mess with them the whole time they are on parole. You know, I mean, that's just the way POs are, you know, parole officers are. But with me, when I overturned my case, they sent me back down to Western to get my stuff together, you know, whatever. And they says, the judge says, you'll be out tomorrow, you know, fine. They took me down to Western. Well, the Department of Corrections legal team, okay, in Pennsylvania, wanted to find a way to overturn my overturning the case, because what it was doing, it was opening the doors all across the United States because it was a constitutional violation. And they wanted to find a way to overturn my overturning. So they locked me up for 12 more days. The only way I actually got out of there was Magistrate Standish, Federal Magistrate Standish, filed a warrant for the arrest of the warden and to pull me out of there. And they sent, there was 5 marshals came down. They had to have me out the front door at 5 o'clock. I didn't have a sign out sheet. I didn't have a home plan. I didn't have a penny in my pocket. They took me to the front door and pushed me out and said, you're out of here. The marshals were out there. They asked me my name. I told them. They said, okay, we can leave now. But they waited until 5 to 5 to get me out of there because they were coming in to arrest the warden at 5 o'clock. So that's how, you know, that's the stuff they pull, you know. And Norm, you know, Farouk, they did the same thing to him. But years ago, he overturned his case. They brought him back to Western. They locked him up so he couldn't get out until the legal team, Department of Corrections legal team, found a way to overturn it. And that's what they did. That was a kind of a saying. When they held me, I said, oh, you're pulling a Farouk on me. And they knew exactly what I was talking about.
Wow, that's something. If the story's in the book, Brothers and Keepers, but
yeah, oh, it is.
Yeah, Charlie, how old were you 1 year into your sentence when you wrote that brief or whatever you
No, that was within 10 days of my sentencing.
Okay, well, how old were you?
I was 36.
Okay, 36. What was your education?
6th grade.
And he went to prison and wrote this thing that justified him getting out of prison. a guy with a sixth grade education.
It
I have a lot more than that, and I don't know
was
that
a
I can do it.
handwritten modification of sentence. It was handwritten to the courts, and I put it in within the 10-day period.
So
It
his
was in on time. Now between the judge and the judge told the attorney, "Hey, he put in a motion, modify sentence. You better put one in, just something else, just frivolous one." And that's exactly what he did. But he put it in 10 days late. You have 30 days to put that in. He put it in 10 days late. I mean, you have 10 days to put it in. Well, he put it in late. And they ended up ruling on his motion an untimely motion instead of the timely motion. And that was the constitutional violation. They ain't allowed to do it. Well, that and the federal courts wouldn't answer me and everything. And the Third Circuit took that as certificate of appealability, and they overturned it. The Third Circuit overturned them all.
So this is a man who had his constitutional rights, right? Remember January 6th and everything. This is a man who actually had his constitutional rights violated to the extent of loss of his freedom. And the best he could hope for is to get pushed out the door at the very last minute, or the very last 5 minutes they could. And here's some federal marshals to say, "Oh, you're out? Okay, good for you, buddy. We're out." And like, there should have been like a parade or something, but that's not how it works.
Well, it should have been. But, well, the person that helped me the most was Foster. Me and him worked in the laundry.
For those of you that don't know, Foster's a guy from our group. He was given a life sentence at the age of 17, right? There's another guy in our group, Ricky Olds, who was given a life sentence. This was in Pittsburgh. He was given a life sentence at the age of 14. My oldest son turned 15 a couple days ago, and for me, it's like it's almost an Emmett Till like story that you could get a life sentence for being there when something bad happened.
Exactly. Well, Foster told me, we worked together in the laundry, and he told me, he says, "I won't do your case. I'll show you how to do it."
On about coming back into society, somebody put into the chat, Shannon, for it, and I wanted to read it because I thought that it was really well written, and I wasn't sure if everybody would have a chance to be able to read it. And it says, just as Charlie said, time stops when you're inside. The time does not stop on the outside, though. These people literally have to relearn everything again. If you're locked up for a long time, you get so used to living that life. Once you get out, it's hard for these guys to try and live without prison. It's as simple as turning on the lights. You have no light switches in prison. Everything is like preschool in prison. Everything happens to you. You get you get up when they say you get up. You eat when they say. You do everything on their time, and you get used to it. So there's shell shock as soon as you enter back into society on your first day out.
I read it, and I really like, it's a fantastic reminder. So we punish people and we take away all of their responsibilities that they have in daily life, and then we throw them out and be like, and now be an independent person again. And I mean, you unlearn it all. Maybe you never learned it in the first place, and maybe you did, but then you lost it all while being incarcerated. I don't know if you appreciate that comparative perspective or not, but in a lot of European countries, prison is built on the principle of, it's called normalization. So the punishment is taking your freedom away, but then the sentence itself should be as normal as life on the outside. So you keep your independence. You still have to make your food, your laundry, you have to build your house, clean your house. You have all the daily responsibilities you and I have too. So when you get out, you're prepared. You have to work and all of that stuff, right? And it makes more sense. It's not as severe, right? But this is maybe why the recidivism rates they're generally lower, because we teach them how to be productive and
Right.
law-abiding people and use the skills that they have learned in prison on the outside as well, versus what Charlie just has been saying and what Shannon said in the chat, right?
Well, they may take your freedom, but just don't let them take your mind.
Dr. Pop, I was actually wondering if, well, as we're talking about, especially in the comparative. I did appreciate that, Dr. Kuhn, so I hope other people did. But I was wondering if you had any more insight on kind of the victim's perspective in these situations, and how, if there's any real negative side to taking some other approach to criminal justice other than what we see here in America today.
Well, what we know about victimization, or at least my point, is that we know that once a person has been victimized, the consequences can be lifelong in terms of the effects of the emotional stress and the fear that it generates. And there's nothing currently about the punitive system that makes the victim feel any safer. So I'm going to try to swing it back to restorative justice. When we look at the studies of countries that are doing restorative justice better than we are, and we have a whole bunch of those countries out there, what we find is that for the victims, this is a very highly effective way of giving them a chance to get answers to questions that they don't have, that they get a better understanding of what happened and why. They get to be able to explain to the offender, this is what's happening to me, this is how your behavior impacted my life. And so they get better closure. You know, one of the things that people talk about in the death penalty cases, right, that the victim's family needs closure. Well, I'm not sure how killing another person gets you closure. That's my personal, but most victim families report that it doesn't give them closure. What brings closure is the ability to, you know, have a better understanding of what happened and to be heard. There's a real value to that for victims, particularly since the punitive system really it does what it wants. And victims are our second, are not even real, players. Charlie was talking about his constitutional rights. Well, victims have no constitutional rights. So they have no say in the criminal justice. Some states have tried to make that, better for them, but for the most part, victims really don't have a say in the process. And so restorative justice really, when done correctly, can give them a massive voice in how their offender is, what happens in the process, and gives them back control where they've lost their control and autonomy.
The victims do come into the courtroom, and they do have a say in what, in a lot of stuff. I had one victim that I knew how much money I got from him, and he sure did blow that up, because of his insurance was covering him. But I mean, that happens. There's shaky victims too. But you're right. There has to be some way to make it up to the victims other than doing time. They got. It'd be hard to get together on it, because most victims at the time will say, I want them to rot in jail. That's the line you get all the time, no matter what. If it's homicide, if it's robbery, if it's burglary, if it's just getting into a fight with somebody, okay, and hurting them somehow or whatever, the victims, almost all of them, want you to rot in jail.
I want to echo that some jurisdictions or countries use it as a first response to crime. So in New Zealand, for instance, most juvenile crime is actually being resolved through restorative justice, through family conferences, obviously understanding that it's not just the one crime, but there were bigger issues that led to that, and they try together to actually resolve it. Unfortunately, we just don't have the mindset in the US to actually try something like this. And I think that's the bigger issue. But it's being done.
Are there differences in the restorative justice model for violent crime versus non-violent crime, or is it not particularly categorized that way in a restorative justice model? Can one of the panelists perhaps talk about that?
It's actually a shame that the non-violent crimes, sometimes they get more time than the violence. The violent crimes. I mean, I was in there for, it was, for robberies. Okay. But while I was in there, I saw people come in with homicides and get out and come back in while I'm still there. And they'd say to me, "Hey, old head, you still here?" I'd say, "Yeah." I mean, that's what I'm saying. A lot of the sentencing is not right. They got to change that. They got to get it right somehow.
I'm over here in Lafourche Parish as well, and my name's Brent, and I'm currently serving a 15-year sentence for forgery, and that's not enough. It kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier about how the state is vindictive. I took my case to trial and I lost. The judge sentenced me to 15 years, and the first plea bargain I was offered was 25, and I couldn't take 25 years. It was a long time, whatever. But the judge sentenced me to, I can honestly say, I can say it's justice. I'll take the 15 years. I did a crime. I'll be sentenced for it. But now the state does not feel that that's enough. I'm a nonviolent offender. Never had a violent crime or any kind of crime that I harmed another person in my life. But I'm facing a life sentence now because they're trying to enhance my sentence here on March 30th. I've been fighting the habitual offender bill here in Louisiana for almost a year now. And I was labeled in court that I'm a menace to society or I'm a danger to the community. And that weighs heavy on the person itself because I don't feel that I'm a danger to nobody. I know that I have a drug addiction that I struggled with for almost 20 years. So we've wrote several letters and my family's involved. And I mean, we're trying to reach out to the DA's office to look, just maybe another chance, something different. I did some jail time before, but in facilities to where if you're treated like an animal or caged like an animal, you're going to be released with like an. So I finally get to this facility here, and I laugh because I feel like I'm always selling this jail, but this jail has completely changed my life in so many different ways, and that's where even Juan, all of us came from this facility here. It's because the people here don't treat you like a number or an inmate anywhere else. So the first thing that I built, or I feel the virtue that I've gained from this place is my self-worth. I feel that I've got that self-worth back. And with that, I know that I'm different. And then you got these programs, but it's not just a cycle you through to get a check at the end of the day, like most programs or however these government funding things work. The people here take their time. You could write a request and they'll call you up at any time if you want to have a one-on-one and talk. It's more like an aftercare or a rehabilitation center. Like you're talking to these people who have doctorates in psychology or social worker and stuff. And it fuels you to want to do good, right? So going back to how the system, the courts told me I'm a danger to the community. Well, I said, you know what? I don't really know what else to do to try to maybe change their outlook on giving me a life sentence. I got three kids that I'm on and a stepson, and then they're no older than 4 years old. And I dread the life to not be with them in this time. For something that, as I'm sentenced to I'm already missed 5 years of their lives, but why the rest of their lives, So I wrote a petition, and I labeled it, it's called, the petition is to help save a life. Because I looked at it like this: if you're riding down the highway, and everybody has a general want to do good, and if you see a car crash and somebody is on fire or whatever, we're not all heroes, but all of us would get out and try to help the person get out the vehicle. You're not going to try to help them and say, well, hold on, or you a convicted felon, did you do this and all this and that? You just help the person.
Right. So
petition, and I submitted it out, asking the very same people that the court's telling me that I'm a danger to help me. And since I've been out, I had it out for about 3 weeks, and I got over 160 signatures on it so far, which gives me hope, or just makes me feel good that I know that there's at least 160 people who read this petition and hear my case, and says, you know, and some of these people are the victims that I'm serving this time for, that they still signed the petition. But right now I'm trying to get this delivered some kind of way to the DA's office before this March 30th court date, for them to see it. You know, that there's, I mean, it's not 1,000 signatures, but it's more than, it's a more voice than just me. It's 160 other people saying, hey, get a guy a chance, or just that we believe in change. And that's what my petition is about. It was about that I'm changing it here to sign it if you believe in change. And at least 160 people agreed with it, you know. And I mean, that's all I wanted to share.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, but the people don't, you know, it's a shame the justice system don't want to look at it that way. You know, that's a shame.
And I mean, it's like he said, like Charlie says, y'all don't really realize that. I mean, coming out of jail prior, there's nothing. I didn't know that there's groups like this that are
right.
talking, people conversing or having conversations about people like me, or that's coming out of jail. You just figure I'm just a convict coming out of jail. I'm a nothing. But being here, going through Inside Out, learning that, man, there's a whole group of people who are trying to learn and change things, kind of gives you the feeling or the desire to do better. Because when it's just you, it's like you can just let yourself down. I've done it my whole life anyway. You know, I'm always letting myself down. But when you got other people, even if they're not really there, but if they're looking at you, you feel like you're gonna do it for them. You want to change because you got to show these people that their time and effort that they're putting into this isn't for nothing. And that's, you know, that's kind of where I think all of us, that's Teasy right here and Juan, and we all in that area, because like Juan said earlier, that these people are here to help you change. They don't force it on you, but if you want it, they're giving you the tool. Not the tools, but just the options. Because I hate that word, the tools, like it's like a wrench or something. You have to have something that's going to guide you into change. You know, it's like it's all an addiction. And it's like, if you leave jail, it needs to have like an aftercare almost. Like if you come out of a drug rehab, you're going to go to AA meetings and you're going to go to these things. And it's kind of like you still need to nurture the person when you come out. And maybe like these think tanks and stuff that kind of keep you involved, keep you active, maybe help the next fellow man coming out is a way to maybe change or to restore things. And like you said, work with the victims, where the victims can see that even after your release, over a period of time, it wasn't for nothing, that person has changed, and, you know, like life went on and it's better. You know, maybe it'll help the next case coming up.
You said something very important there. When you started, you said you had a drug addiction. I did too. And, you know, they know that we had drug addictions, and that's what led us to do what we did, right, more or less, because you know, that's another thing. It's not really understand it, you know, but that's one of the things that leads us into what we do half the time, you know. But, you know, what can you do? You got to go, you know, you got to keep fighting, you know, you got to keep fighting it. How whenever the judge overturned my case, he says, well, I'm going to give you 5 years parole, because you're institutionalized. Well, I didn't say a word. I wanted out of the courtroom and get back and get the hell out. And then I reported one time. And after I reported, I went back and I got a hold of the judge on the phone. And I told the judge, I said, I'm going to file a motion on you because you gave me an illegal sentence. I did my time and you gave me 5 more years, which is an illegal sentence. I didn't do anything. He says, well, you're institutionalized. I told him, you institutionalized me. I didn't. Well, he called me back. He said, I'll call you back. He called me back and said, Mr. Lewis, your paper's terminated. Just because I stuck up for it. You know, you got to keep pushing.
Yes.
But while we're still kind of on this topic, from a question in the chat, I would like to know how some of the incarcerated gentlemen think about restorative justice and maybe meeting their victims. Would you, and why or why not? And do you think that would be beneficial? And after that, there's one more question in the chat too.
Sometimes it would, sometimes it wouldn't. I wouldn't mind meeting them, but all my victims were dead. You know, after, I mean, I did 18 years, they were all dead before I got out. You know, there's no way you can meet them, you know? I mean, when they give you that kind of time, who's going to be left, you know, even if you are? But the restorative justice, I think part of it would be good. The whole thing, I'm not sure of, because like I said, a lot of people still have that mentality of let them rot in prison, let them rot. That's exactly what you get from them.
Brent or Juan or Terrell, if you'd like to jump in.
Yeah, I would like I agree with it. Like I meet like as far as the victim, I will meet him, but at the same sense, like everybody don't have that forgiveness in their heart. So another thing that would be good with me is just to let them know, or just to, you know, prove to myself that I changed, and just let them see it have an emotion, like, you know, like instead of like contacting them, getting in touch with them or whatever, just let them see that I changed. You know, but I owe it to myself to prove to myself before anybody else does.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I would like to work with my victims. I think it would bring me closure, like to put a face to the crime. I'll maybe validate it to where I can put it behind me, that I you know, if I know that I don't, maybe not forgiveness from the person, but at least a conversation, and maybe hopefully some maybe they forgive you, that you can move on. And then I just keeps, to me, it just keeps building towards myself, my inner self. You know, if I'm already broke down to nothing, I have to build myself up. Meeting my victim might break it down, or you might not break it down, might make you nervous or whatever, but I think the end result would be a positive. And if you keep stacking positives on top of positives, I think you're going to get a positive.
Right before I have addressed Kendall's question, Dr. Pop, I was wondering if, from the victim's perspective, if you had any comments on some of the things that have been said here about how sometimes victims might not all have some forgiveness in their hearts. Have you seen, is there models that can address these types of concerns, even with people who might seem apprehensive in the beginning, or even Dr. Kuhn or Dr. Conti, if there's anything to add on that?
I think that it's easy to hate what you don't know, or if you don't know a person, they become the stereotype, or the stereotype of what a criminal is. I think that when you have face-to-face conversations between the victim and the offender, that the victim benefits from seeing the individual as a person who is much more complex than the charges that were brought against them. You know, I'm sorry, I'm not sure of whose name, the gentleman with the group of guys, is that Juan? Yeah, Juan, I'm sorry, Juan. Juan mentioned, you know, that people have very complex histories, and, you know, understanding the social forces that drove an individual to engage in criminal behavior may be very useful for a victim to understand, so that they can heal and so they can forgive. I think so often we think of crime as being something person chose to violate the law, but honestly, we've talked a lot about drug addiction, and addiction is it's a beast, and it forces people's hands in very uncomfortable ways to make really lousy choices. And I think it's easier to see that having a direct conversation between Charlie and me having a conversation than, you know, the victim never having any face-to-face contact. So there is evidence that there is really a sense of a better understanding between the two groups, the two parties.
Could I say something? You know, the restorative justice and the victims. If you could, if I mean, I don't know if it'd be ever possible. Talk to the victims. Have you talked to the victims or meet with the victims if both sides agree before sentencing? And maybe then afterwards, but let it make a difference. You know, I mean, maybe if you're sentenced to 20 years, after 5 years, let them talk to the victim, see if he can get some kind of relief after 5 years, you know, or you know, I don't know. It's hard to figure out and hard to explain. I'm sure if it was easy, it would have been done or whatever, you know. And like you say about in Germany and in the other countries, and that they're not as big a, you know, they don't have the population that the United States has. You know, I mean, the not only the population but the prison population too. You know, but I mean, if you could meet with the victim maybe before your sentencing, you know, after the, because they give you a trial and then they sentence you afterwards. Meet with the victim then, or even like I say, 5 years into your sentence, you know, a certain amount of time into your sentence, you know, meet with the victim and let them see what changes you have made or why you did what you did. Because in the courtroom, they don't let you explain nothing, you know, but maybe you'd have a chance then, and let the victims have a say in your sentencing, in your time.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things Charlie is saying is, you know, there are restorative justice diversion programs. And so that there, you know, there's an opportunity then for the victim and the offender to talk prior to the case going forward, or even preventing the case from going forward. But oftentimes what victim advocates are concerned about in terms of restorative justice is that where it would be best for probably the offender is probably before sentencing, so that the victim would have maybe a better understanding, and you know, who knows what the victim's impact statement then would say.
Right.
But oftentimes the victim is not at that point ready.
Let them have a shot at saying what kind of sentence they would prefer compared to what kind of sentence the state is giving them or whoever's giving it to them. Yeah. But see, in Pennsylvania, I don't know how it is in Louisiana, but in Pennsylvania, Norm, do you remember Mudman? Do you remember hearing about Mudman? Well, that was while I was in, when I first went in, they didn't give anyone commutation or pardons or anything because of one person. If one person screws up, they hold it against everybody. That's the problem. One of the big problems in the prison system. You know, that guy, he murdered, he went and killed a cop, and they held that against everyone. You know, everyone in prison paid for that.
Charlie, it's interesting to me listening to the guy on the fraud case or the counterfeiting case. A few years back, someone asked me to meet with this guy. He was a son of great privilege, and he had been set up in a good business, and he defrauded all his dad's rich friends out of a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And then he got out of prison, and he created this program that they were he became like a contractor, and they were building these houses, and he was hiring returning citizens to do it. And someone said, "Would you meet with this guy, Norman, and take a read of him?" So I sat, we talked. I was like, "This guy's going back to jail." Right. And while you guys were talking, I Googled his name. This August, him and his wife were both charged for $1 million in fraud. So it's like, it's really complicated, because I doubt you got anywhere near the gentleman with the counterfeiting charges. I doubt you got anywhere near that. He did 18 months the first time. Came out, said he was all changed when 18 months is, you know. And now he's, you know, he tried this thing and he's back in. So it's like, it's so complicated. And it's, I put in the chat earlier, if you look at the states with the highest incarceration rate and the highest level of income inequality, there's a lot of overlap. Louisiana has the highest incarceration, one of the highest economic, I'll shut up. I know we're.
Yeah. Well, there, you just said it. The guy had all them fraud charges and he only had 18 months. Look at this poor guy here. He's getting a life sentence out of fraud charges. You know, that's one of the big problems that used to aggravate me is there's no sentencing guidelines that could be used overall. You know, like feds got to stop, get in on it or something, because one state will give you 5 years, the other state will give you a life bit, you know, for the same charges. You know, that's part of your to restore justice, you have to restore the sentencing. You have to start at the judges and the lawyers. You know, I that's the way I feel. I'm sorry, that's the way I feel about it. You know, you got to start there.
Hey, Ms. D, when you were saying like talk to the victim or whatever, I look at it like, I sold drugs, so everybody that sold drugs, I guess, was a victim. I don't have no drug addiction. I don't do drugs, but you know, I was a seller. So, now that I'm gonna bring you back to the community. Now, a lot of people in life, you know what I'm saying, you know, they follow the good, some follow the bad. All right, so I would like to talk to I would like to talk to my community, to like people that respected me, know me, taking the same route. I would like to talk to them and let them see, as I'm talking, for the change that I did. You feel me? So other people can pick that up, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, and they can, you know, learn off of that, you know what I'm saying? Like, man, you know, things must be real, you know, wine change, you know? Not everybody gonna do it, but some people do it, you know what I'm saying? The people
Like
that—
a role model, right? Is that like a role model to your community when you go back? Is that what you're?
Yeah, that would be nice, you know what I'm saying? Even if I change, even if one person follow my footsteps for his change, I ain't saying follow my footsteps for going where I go for my future, but just change and just stop what they doing. I'd be okay with that. You know what I'm saying? Knowing that I changed somebody's life, you know what I'm saying?
So you get back to the thing with, if you're educated and taught a trade or whatever while you're in there, you know, it's something that you can come out to. You ain't going to go out and sell dope anymore because you're going to have a job to make the money that you would have made otherwise. You know, that's another thing that the state's got to do is start giving the guys some kind of job placement or job, training, whatever. You know, Pennsylvania don't have shit for that. I'm sorry about that, but they really don't. You know, I hear Jens talking about how, the job training and everything. That's a good thing. You know, hopefully it works.
Right. Yeah, that's something they just started though.
Yeah. Well, got to start somewhere. Hopefully it works. Like I said before, you got these people here that are actually trying to understand, and people that are trying to understand finally. So hopefully everything works out for the better. It's going to take a while, but it'll work if they keep at it.
Well, I do not want to cut our conversation short because I could stay here all night, but we are starting to get close to the end of our time. So I just wanted to go to Kendall. I know she had a question, and I think there might be one other one before we end out here, but I just wanted to let everyone know that. Kendall, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was really grateful to hear everybody's testimonies, just people's personal experiences and everything like that. I kind of wanted to ask about just like in relation to restorative justice, because I know like Brent touched on it and Juan also touched on it, just like the experiences of like both people who suffer from addiction and people who are kind of just like, in the like selling drugs because like you kind of like have to get by. I think that we also have to like kind of put a face on like the selling of drugs, the distribution of drugs, and the fact that people are complicated by socioeconomic statuses, by race, things like that. And then also by drug addiction itself, just the vulnerability of that.
So I kind of wanted to ask, like, because I know that some states and some countries even, like, they have programs where people who are affected by like drug addiction, they aren't actually charged with any crimes. Instead, they are promised like rehabilitation programs. And even whenever it comes to people who are selling drugs, like they're trying to like incorporate more like understanding laws about like socioeconomic factors that might complicate it. So I had like that one question, but I also had a question in relation to restorative justice in regards to the prison system, because we know that like private prisons exist. Um, and just what does that look like? Because like you're overcoming that system, you're overcoming the idea of things being privately owned, and you have to fill these, well, you don't have to, but people are trying to fill these beds. And, you know, we know the prison pipeline system also like helps kind of like mediate that. So I guess like what my question is like, how does restorative justice like try to combat that? Because that's a really big like machine almost that you have to work against.
I'll start and then somebody can build on that. But I think Norm said it initially too. It's not a one fits all solution, and it's also not the only solution, right? So it can be put, or it can be implemented at different stages of the criminal justice system. Dr. Pop talked about this. It can be at the diversionary stage. Sometimes it's post-sentencing, right? It can take all different forms. And I think what it does is it's not fixing the system. Right now, unfortunately, it's just an add-on at different stages. I hope that we'll use it much, much more. So eventually it becomes a viable alternative to the traditional criminal justice system, but it's not going to fix it. Norm also said once, and I really like it, exactly the way it's designed to be. I still remember that. And there's so much truth to that. The government is making too much money with the system and too many other benefits of the system that we have right now, where we're excluding people from society that we don't want. I mean, I'm not saying I personally don't want them, but that's what we have decided as society. We don't want the poor, we don't want the mentally ill, we don't want the ones addicted to drugs. So we'll just put them behind bars, and then our society looks nice and clean. So restorative justice is not going to fix it. But the way I see my job, for instance, is I'm trying to change one student at a time, right? So if it's one student per term who picks up what I've been trying to tell them in terms of restorative justice and community building, then maybe that person will go out and will be in a position of power eventually and can make a little change, right? So it's baby steps, but the system right now, it's too entrenched and too many people want it. So we won't, unfortunately, restorative justice is not going to solve it.
You brought up something that is very good. You brought it up about the people that are mentally ill and everything. They closed down here in Pennsylvania. They closed down all the mental institutions, and they put all of them in prison. And in prison, it is not the place for them. You know, it's not the place for them. And that's exactly what they did. They closed Mayview down. They closed all these mental institutions down in Pennsylvania, and they all went to prison. Now, I've seen a lot of these guys in prison that have mental problems, severe mental problems. And I've seen some bad things happen with them, you know, because of their mental, you know, their problems. You know, they shouldn't be in prison. They should be in an institution, but not in prison. I wanted to say one thing to everybody. My crimes, I deserve some time. I did deserve time for what I did, but I didn't deserve 70 years. That's all.
Are there any other questions from the audience that they would like to ask before we conclude for the night? Like I said, I could keep this conversation going on all night, but unfortunately our time is starting to come to an end here.
Come on, Warren.
Sorry, I kind of have a little question. So do you think like about like how the public views prison is kind of like part of the reason why like people kind of view like punishment as like the only way prison to be run, like I guess like how prison is presented in the pop culture or things like that? Like, do you think that could that be a factor into why the prison system is so like into the punishment rather than like rehabilitation? Is that?
Sorry, so let me rephrase your question. So are you asking, do you think that like current pop culture and America's views about prison are playing a role in why our society might not want prison to change from the current way that it is being conducted?
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant. It was just ugly phrase for me.
No, that's okay, no problem. Would one of Dr. Kuhn or Dr. Pop or Dr. Conti, do any of you guys have any input for that?
I have to admit, I just got distracted by sounds in my house, so I did not catch that question. I know you
I
just.
bet it's your husband.
So I don't know about the role pop culture plays in how we treat inmates in prison. I think it really is our bootstrap, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, individualism, rugged individualism is a really driving force. And so we have to have accountability for our criminal behavior. But I think that what's really going to drive a change, and maybe I'm being optimistic, is that eventually we're going to have so many people in prison, it's going to cost so much money that there's going to be a taxpayer revolt. And then there's going to be questions about, hey, I don't want to pay any more taxes. Can we do this more economically? When Brent was talking about his forgery case turning into a life sentence, I was thinking to myself, talk about harming society.
Yeah.
It's not cheap to keep Brent behind bars. And he's a nonviolent offender. Restorative justice is perfect for his case. How can we make society whole and send him back to the community where he can be a productive member of the community? But right now we have a system that does a lot of harm. But as long as we're willing to pay for it, as taxpayers are willing to pay for it, we're going to be, I think, stuck with this system. So for me, it's going to come down to finances. I guess
I agree with Anne Marie on that, and it's interesting because what she said maybe might happen because it's like more and more Republicans you're seeing like, well, wait a minute, we don't want our tax money going to this, but there's a sort of a psychological gain or capital involved in this where it's like, look at the prison, that's where the bad people are. They're in there, I'm out here. They're bad, I'm good. So it's this sort of nonsense story. We sell ourselves and each other that they're somehow the bad guys, we're somehow the good guys, and that's the story of America from the very beginning. We've from the first day and before the first day, the why people came here, right? Because we're trying to have something better, we're trying to be better, and there's the devil's all around us, and we have to strike back.
And to add on that too, I think we all fall into the trap, some more, some less, but we want simple solutions, right? So, and that's very simple. They're bad, we're good, we're on the outside, right? And it's so easy to just continue with that and it kind of and reinforces the stereotypes what we have. But this is where restorative justice comes in and humanizing the people who have committed crimes, especially when they come out. Anne has made that point several times. So, yeah, I think it's getting more into the gray area, right? And it's complex. People don't just wake up overnight and say, I want to become a drug addict or I want to rob somebody, right? It's there's much more to it, but people just don't want it. They just want simply black and white. So yeah, we just need to, one friend, one neighbor at a time, change their minds.
Thank you. So before we conclude then today, that you actually gave us a great segue into that, Dr. Kuhn. The last thing I was going to have for us today was for people like me who are fired up after hearing this discussion and like wanting to get involved and make some kind of change however we can, like what role can students and people who are here from the outside community, what can we do and play, what role can we play in, just creating awareness or affecting change in restorative justice or any of these issues we've covered tonight?
I think it first starts with education and attending panels like this and just talking about it, right? I think that's what it starts. After winter break, I got a couple of emails from students who said, thank you, Dr. Kuhn. All the discussions we had in class, I had them over dinner table with my family. Didn't always go so well, but they were good discussions. I'm like, yes, this is what I want, right? So the first step, I think, is just talking to people and also talking to people. This is why I like the Inside Out classes so much. We all are much more comfortable talking to people who agree with us, who have the same life experiences, the same values. And I think it pushes us out of our comfort zone to be with people who are not exactly like us. And I think just doing that more, pushing yourself a little bit more to be with people who have different viewpoints and understanding also where are they coming from and why do they have these viewpoints, instead of shutting down and being like, I don't want this, right? So education, I think, being open-minded and just learning more and more about it and then spreading the word.
I'm going to jump in real fast and say I put a couple times this panel. I put the link for our Friday morning 8:30 to 10:30 think tank. Everyone's welcome. Come whenever you want. Stay as long as you want. Come late, leave early, like I used to do at church when I went. Anne Marie's laughing. She knows the routine. Sneak out of communion. So anyway, so do that. Check that out, especially if you're a Slippery Rock student. And then when the pandemic's over, insist that Dr. Kuhn help start a think tank for you at SCI Mercer.
And Albion.
And Albion. There's already one at Albion, actually, Charlie. So maybe there is a think tank at Albion, so they can drive up there if they want to.
Yeah. I can't believe Dr. Kathleen hasn't said anything.
She's got the night off. Sarah, you were saying something?
Yeah, you set the bar too high, Norm. It's so hard to follow through. It's intimidating too.
I barely have my head above water. You trust me, you'll do way better.
We could stand on his shoulders.
And he would, and he'd write a brief and get away with it.
Yes, I would. Anyway, I can't believe Dr. Kathleen hasn't said anything.
Like Dr. Conti said, she has the night off. She's just a participant tonight, hanging out with us.
Listening and learning, Charlie.
Thank
you for everything you've done. This is beautiful, Dee. This is probably will go down in history as the best attended sociology club event ever. This was absolutely amazing.
Great job, Dee.
Everybody.
Great leadership, Dr. Pelt.
Yeah.
This was fantastic.
None of this would have been possible without all of you guys being here and, asking questions and being a part of this. So thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Brent and to Terrell and to Juan, who, joined us from some circumstances that aren't the easiest to be joining us from. Charlie, we got you figured out on the iPad over there. So thank you all so much for being here. The think tank meeting is tomorrow morning, and there's a sociology club meeting on Monday night if anybody would like to attend that too. And if anyone has any questions about the information we covered here, want to get some links that Dr. Kuhn or Dr. Conti or Dr. Pop had put in the chat, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. And everybody have a great rest of the night.
Yeah, Ms. D, I'd like to say thank you for inviting us, and we enjoy coming and and we really mean that from the heart, you know what I'm saying? And it means a lot to us, you know what I'm saying? For the, have people that we don't know that care and just worry about what's going on to make things better, you know what I'm saying? Because sometimes, most of the time, you don't have no say-so from the inside. But I like to thank you, and I like to thank everybody else. And Norm, I like to thank you too. I thought I was gonna see you, but I like to thank you all too, bro.
Good to see you, man.
Bro.
I haven't picked on Norm all night.
I'm going to be too scarred to come to the meeting tomorrow, Charlie.
Okay, well, thank you again so much, everybody. And like I said, have a nice night. Juan, thank you for saying that. It means a lot that you guys took time out of your day to be here too. Have a great evening.
Yeah, you fellas down in Louisiana, hang in there.
Thank you. Dee, this is one of the cool things the only cool thing that came out of COVID, that we have now people participating from inside of prisons. I don't think this would have happened without COVID. So thank you, COVID, and thanks for
silver linings. Thank you for pointing that out, Dr. Kuhn.
Dee, do me a favor, send me the information for the
participants.
No, for the can you send me a list of participants? That would be lovely. So I can get my students' names registered. But I was going to say, send me the sociology club stuff so I can send it to the class on the announcement pages.
Oh, perfect. Yes, thank you.
Okay. This was fabulous, Dee.
Thank you so much for being a part of it, Dr. Paul.
Oh, no problem at all. I'll see you Tuesday.
Yes. No, it's a day off. The wellness day, Thursday.
Wait, what's a wellness? Do we have a day off next week?
On Tuesday. Yeah. That's how I felt too, Dr. Puck.
I'm sorry. I'm just like this. I didn't realize. So definitely send that to me so I can get that out to the class then.
I will, absolutely. I'll send it to you.
Have a good night, guys. Thank you, Shirley. I learned a lot from you and Brandon Terrell. So I really appreciate your participation.
Deidre, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, Charlie. Thank you for being here.
I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be talking to you.
Absolutely. See you around.
Miss Kathleen?
Yes.
I wish you'd have got in on this. I know you have a lot to say.
I was listening and learning today, Charlie. I'm sure I'll be talking plenty tomorrow.
Tomorrow, we'll get it tomorrow. Okay. I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good night, Charlie.
Bye, Charlie. Okay. Kendall, thank you for helping out. That's my dad over there and my mom. They're still
here. Oh my gosh.
No problem.
Hi.
I just wanted to say great job. I literally could have listened to this for like hours. It was so good. So
that's good because part 2 then. That's what it sounds like.
There has to be a part 2. Yes, 100%.
This is amazing.
Oh man.
Hi.
Thanks, Dee.
No problem. Thank you, Kendall. Okay. Well, is there? Oh, hi, Mom. My parents love them. So supportive. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything, Dr. A, that you wanted to chat about?
I cannot think of a thing. I just wanted to say again, wonderful, wonderful job.
Thank you. I'm really excited for how it went. I thought this was a good conversation. It seemed like everybody got a lot out of it. So
I think it was fantastic. And I could tell actually just, how much you put into organizing this and bringing it all together. And the delivery was beautiful. I mean, you're like professional level MC over here, Dee. It's so impressive. Anyway, beautiful job. I really enjoyed it. And I know that the attendees did as well, too.
Thanks, Dr. A.
You're rocking it as usual.
I agree with everything she said.
Yeah. See, there we go.
Mom, this is Dr. A. Okay, just so you know, you guys
Hi, Dee's mom.
Hello.
Okay.
Nice
well,
to meet you.
I guess I'll let everybody get back to their evening. Thanks for spending like 2 hours with me, and I will see you tomorrow, Dr. A. And my parents, I'll call you guys. Love you.
Okay, love you too. Bye. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Good night.